Mafia boss with a kiss broke into my heart, stole every bit of it till I lost control into his arms. The winter wind off Lake Michigan cut through the night air, but I barely felt the cold. I stood at Navy Pier, the Ferris wheel glowing behind us like a giant halo of colored lights. Leonard Creighton stood in front of me, his muscular frame towering over mine. His tailored black coat hung open over a crisp dress shirt, revealing the intricate tattoo sleeve on his left arm, roses intertwined with thorns that disappeared beneath the fabric. Another tattoo peeked from his collar, dark ink against his skin. His jaw was strong, defined. His eyes were darker than the night around us, intense and focused completely on me. I wore my elegant coat over the emerald dress from the gallery where we first met. My brown hair caught the pier lights as the wind whipped it around my face. I could feel my own eyes reflecting everything I felt, fear and desire mixed together in equal measure. His large hands came up to cup my face, gentle despite their obvious strength. His voice was low, almost broken when he spoke. I lost control the moment I met you. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what he was. I knew the danger that followed him like a shadow. People whispered his name in Chicago's underground with respect and fear. Leonard Creighton was not a safe man to love, but standing there in his arms, feeling the warmth of his body blocking the wind, I felt safer than I had ever felt anywhere else in my life. Nothing made sense except this, except him. He leaned down slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. I couldn't. When his lips finally touched mine, everything changed. The kiss was tender but possessive, gentle but consuming. His hands held my face like I was something precious, something sacred. My hands gripped the front of his coat, holding on because my legs had forgotten how to keep me standing. In that moment, I understood what it meant to lose control completely. Have you ever met someone who terrified and completed you at the same time? Someone who made you question everything you thought you knew about safety and love? Before we continue with how we got to this moment, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and share this story with someone who believes in powerful love stories. Subscribe to our channel because tomorrow we're dropping another story you won't want to miss. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this one, and we're so grateful for each and every one of you. To understand how that kiss at Navy Pier changed everything, you need to know where we both came from. Leonard Creighton and I lived in the same city, but we might as well have existed in different universes. Leonard's penthouse sat on the 42nd floor of a building in downtown Chicago, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Lake Michigan. The view was stunning, the lake stretching out like a dark mirror, the city lights reflecting off the water, Navy Pier visible in the distance. His home was filled with expensive furniture, original artwork, and every luxury money could buy. A chef's kitchen that rarely got used. A master bedroom with a bed that could fit 4 people. A wine collection worth more than most people's cars. But luxury doesn't keep you warm at night. Leonard lived alone in all that space. He would stand at those massive windows at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, watching the city that both feared and needed him. He controlled more of Chicago's underground operations than most people realized. Shipments that came through the ports. Establishments that paid for protection. Information that flowed through channels he had spent 15 years building. People respected him. People feared him. But nobody really knew him. He had built his empire from absolutely nothing. Leonard grew up in the rough neighborhood south of Millennium Park, where survival meant being tougher than the next guy. His father died when he was 12 years old, leaving his mother to raise him alone. By 14, Leonard was working whatever jobs he could find. By 16, he was protecting his block. By 20, he was running it. His body told the story of that life. The muscles weren't from vanity or gym selfies. They came from years of physical work, from fights he couldn't afford to lose, from carrying weight that would have broken most men. Every inch of his 6'3" frame was built for survival. The tattoos told stories too. The rose and thorn sleeve on his left arm represented his mother, beauty that survived despite harsh conditions. She had passed 5 years ago, and he wore her memory on his skin. The compass rose across his chest pointed to the 4 corners of his territory, but also to the 4 values his grandmother had taught him before she died: loyalty, strength, honor, and family. There was script along his ribs in Latin, a quote about fortune favoring the bold. A phoenix covered his right shoulder blade, death and rebirth, rising from ashes. But despite everything he had built, despite the power and the money and the respect, Leonard was lonely. He had associates, not friends. He had women who wanted his money or his status, but nobody who wanted him. The real him. The man who still missed his mother. Who sometimes drove out to the Indiana dunes just to hear the waves. Who loved old jazz music because his grandmother used to play it. Who knew every word of the poems she had read to him as a child. My world couldn't have been more different. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, a neighborhood where tree-lined streets felt almost suburban despite being in the heart of Chicago. My apartment was small but cozy. I had filled it with plants, books, and artwork I had collected over the years. My furniture came from thrift stores and estate sales. Nothing matched, but everything felt like home. Every morning, I walked 3 blocks to a corner cafe near the Lincoln Park Zoo. I ordered the same thing, a medium coffee with cream, a blueberry muffin. I knew the barista's name. She knew mine. It was the kind of simple routine that made life feel steady and predictable. I worked as a restoration specialist at the Art Institute of Chicago. My job was to bring damaged artwork back to life. Paintings that had faded or cracked or been damaged by time and neglect. I would spend weeks, sometimes months, carefully cleaning away dirt and old varnish, repairing tears in canvas, matching colors that had been applied centuries ago. It required patience, precision, and a belief that broken things could be made whole again. That philosophy extended beyond my work. I believed that nothing was truly beyond saving. Everything beautiful was still there underneath the damage. It just needed someone who cared enough to do the painstaking work of restoration. I had moved to Chicago from a small town in Wisconsin 3 years earlier. Back home, everyone knew everyone. Life moved slowly. Opportunities were limited. I wanted more, not more money or status, but more possibility, more art, more culture, more life. Chicago gave me all of that. But it also gave me loneliness I hadn't expected. In a city of millions, I somehow felt more alone than I ever had in my small town. I had co-workers, not friends. I had coffee shop acquaintances, not real connections. I had built a safe life, a predictable life, but somewhere along the way, I had also built walls. My evenings were quiet. I would walk along the lakefront path, watching joggers and cyclists pass by. I would visit the zoo on weekends, spending hours watching the animals. I would lose myself in books, in other people's stories, because my own felt too small and contained. I had dated occasionally over those 3 years. Nice men with office jobs and predictable futures. Men who were safe. But safe felt boring. Safe felt like settling. So I stayed single, telling myself I was waiting for something real, something that made me feel alive. Leonard and I moved through the same city, but in completely different orbits. He commanded rooms in expensive restaurants and exclusive clubs. I spent my days in museum basements with damaged art. He lived in luxury and loneliness at the top of a skyscraper. I lived in modest comfort and loneliness on a quiet street. We should never have met. Our worlds had no reason to collide. But on a frigid February evening, they did, and nothing was ever the same again. The Art Institute was hosting a private exhibition on a Friday night in mid-February. Chicago was in the grip of a brutal cold snap. The kind of cold that made your face hurt when you stepped outside. The kind that sent wind off Lake Michigan like ice knives cutting through the warmest coat. I hadn't wanted to attend. I preferred working in my quiet restoration studio, not standing in a gallery making small talk with wealthy donors. But my supervisor insisted. The exhibition showcased recently restored works, and I had spent 4 months bringing one particular painting back to life. The team responsible for the restorations needed to be there. So I put on my emerald dress, the nicest thing in my closet, and forced myself to go. Leonard attended for entirely different reasons. The charity hosting the exhibition was one of his legitimate business investments. He owned a piece of several art-related nonprofits in Chicago. They were clean money, respectable fronts that let him move in circles where his other business dealings would never be discussed. He arrived fashionably late, as was his habit. His tailored suit was Italian, expensive without being flashy. He had learned long ago that real power didn't need to announce itself. The muscular build beneath the suit was evident, but refined. His tattoos were carefully hidden under the formal clothing, except for a small edge of ink that occasionally peeked from his collar. Leonard moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who had learned to wear charm like armor. He shook hands with the board members. He made polite conversation about the importance of preserving art. He smiled at the right moments, nodded at the right times, and gave absolutely nothing real of himself. He was bored. He had been bored for years. The exhibition occupied 3 connected galleries. I stood in the second gallery, away from the main crowd. In front of me hung the painting I had restored, a seascape from the 1870s. When it had arrived in my studio, it was so dark you could barely see the image. Years of smoke damage, dirt, and yellowed varnish had buried the original colors. 4 months of painstaking work had brought it back. Now the painting showed what the artist had truly intended: a stormy sea with waves that seemed to move, dark clouds breaking to reveal a hint of light on the horizon. It was dramatic and beautiful and hopeful all at once. I stood there alone, just looking at it. Not networking. Not making conversation. Just enjoying the quiet satisfaction of seeing something I had saved now sharing its beauty with the world again. That's when Leonard walked into the gallery. He noticed me before I noticed him. Later, he would tell me that I looked like I was greeting an old friend. That the genuine emotion on my face in a room full of fake smiles stopped him in his tracks. I felt his presence before I saw him. That sounds impossible, but it's true. Something made me turn my head, and there he was, standing about 15 feet away, looking directly at me. Our eyes met. The noise of the event seemed to fade. I couldn't have looked away if I wanted to, and I didn't want to. He was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair and darker eyes. Handsome in a way that wasn't pretty or soft, but strong and masculine. There was something in his expression I couldn't quite name. Intensity, intelligence, and underneath it all, a loneliness that matched my own. Leonard walked toward me like he had made a decision. His movements were confident but not aggressive. When he stopped beside me, I caught the scent of his cologne, subtle and expensive. "You look at it like you're seeing an old friend," he said. His voice was deep, with a roughness to it that suggested he hadn't grown up in the wealthy circles he now moved through. I turned to face him fully. Up close, he was even more striking. "I suppose I am," I replied, finding my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I've spent 4 months with this painting. I know every brush stroke, every layer of paint, every crack in the canvas. It's like sending a child off into the world. You're the restorer. He glanced at the small placard next to the painting that credited my work. Ursula Smith. You bring dead things back to life. Not dead, I corrected gently. Just forgotten. Buried under time and neglect. Everything beautiful is still there, underneath. It just needs someone patient enough to reveal it again. Something shifted in his expression. His eyes held mine with an intensity that should have made me uncomfortable but didn't. And if something is too damaged, too far gone. I met his gaze without wavering. Nothing is ever too far gone. Not if someone cares enough to try. The words hung in the air between us. I had been talking about art, but we both knew the conversation had become about something else entirely. Leonard Creighton, he said, extending his hand. Ursula Smith, I replied, taking it. His hand was large, warm, his grip firm but careful. The handshake lasted a moment longer than professional. We talked. The minutes slipped away unnoticed. We moved to a quiet corner of the gallery where we wouldn't be interrupted. Leonard asked me about restoration, and I found myself explaining my philosophy that patience could achieve what force never could. That sometimes you had to work in layers, revealing beauty slowly. He told me about growing up in Chicago, about his grandmother who had raised him to appreciate beautiful things even when his world was harsh. He talked about old jazz music, about driving to the Indiana dunes sometimes just to watch the waves because they reminded him that some things were bigger than his problems. I told him about Wisconsin, about leaving my small town to find something more, about seeing beauty in broken things, in the cracks and imperfections that tell stories. 2 hours passed like 20 minutes. The crowd around us thinned as people left for dinner reservations and late-night plans. Neither of us noticed. When the gallery staff started giving polite hints that the event was ending, Leonard finally asked, "Can I see you again?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. We exchanged phone numbers. As we walked toward the exit together, Leonard stopped at the door. He took my hand gently, raising it to his lips in an old-fashioned gesture that should have seemed outdated but didn't. He pressed a kiss to my knuckles, his eyes never leaving mine. The kiss was courtly, respectful, but the intensity in his eyes was anything but casual. Heat, want, and something deeper that I couldn't name yet. "Good night, Ursula," he said softly. "Good night, Leonard." I walked to my car in the bitter cold, but I felt warm from the inside out. My hand tingled where his lips had touched my skin. My heart raced with something between excitement and fear. Leonard stood in the parking lot and watched until my car disappeared from view. For the first time in years, he felt something close to hope. We both knew, standing in that frozen February night, that something significant had just begun. Something that would change everything. Leonard called me the next evening. Not a text, an actual phone call. In a world where everyone hides behind screens, hearing his voice made my stomach flutter. "Have dinner with me tomorrow night," he said. Not a question, but not quite a demand either. Somewhere in between. "I'd like that," I replied. "Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse. 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up." Gibson's was a Chicago institution in the Gold Coast district. The kind of place where power brokers and celebrities came for perfectly cooked steaks and old-world service. I had walked past it 100 times but never been inside. Leonard arrived at my apartment exactly at 7, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. He held the car door open for me, his hand warm on my lower back as he guided me inside. The gesture was protective without being possessive. The restaurant was everything I expected. Dark wood, white tablecloths, the hum of expensive conversation. But Leonard had requested a corner booth, away from the main dining room. Private, intimate. What struck me most during that dinner was how attentive he was. Really attentive. Not just nodding politely while waiting for his turn to talk. He actually listened. I mentioned preferring red wine over white. When the sommelier came, Leonard ordered a specific vintage he thought I would enjoy based on that single comment. I told him I didn't eat meat, explaining my vegetarianism apologetically since we were in a steakhouse. He didn't miss a beat, asking the waiter to bring the chef's best vegetarian options, things not even on the menu. He remembered that I had mentioned loving old architecture at the gallery. He asked what buildings in Chicago fascinated me most. When I talked about the restoration work on various historic structures, he listened like I was sharing the secrets of the universe. "Tell me something true about yourself," I said over dessert. "Something you don't usually share." Leonard was quiet for a long moment. His fingers traced patterns on the condensation of his water glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more vulnerable. "I'm tired," he admitted. "I've built something substantial. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I have power, influence, respect. But I'm tired of the weight of it. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," I said softly. "What we build can become our prison if we're not careful." He looked up at me, something like relief in his eyes. Like he had been holding his breath and could finally exhale. "And you?" he asked. "Tell me something true." I took a breath, deciding to be brave. "I'm terrified. Of this. Of you. I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something that could change everything, and I don't know if I'm brave enough to jump." Leonard reached across the table. His large hand covered mine, his thumb tracing slow circles on my palm. The touch sent electricity up my arm. "I'll catch you," he promised, his eyes locked on mine. "I swear it." I believed him. God help me, I believed him completely. Our second date was at the Green Mill in Uptown, a legendary jazz club that had been running since the 1920s. The interior was all vintage glamour, Art Deco details, velvet booths, a long mahogany bar. A four-piece band played on the small stage, the saxophone's sultry notes filling the room. Leonard led me to a curved booth in the corner. As we sat down, he leaned close so I could hear him over the music. "Al Capone used to sit in this exact booth," he said. "There's still a tunnel beneath the building that he used to escape during raids. And you know this because you're a history buff." I asked, already suspecting the answer. "I know this because I know Chicago's hidden corners," he replied. "The history that doesn't make it into tour books." We sat close in that booth, his arm along the back of the seat behind me. As the music washed over us, he told me stories about the city. Not tour guide facts, but real history. The places that mattered. The people who shaped Chicago's underground. He spoke carefully, never explicitly saying what he did, but painting a picture clear enough. I should have been scared. Maybe I was. But I was also fascinated. For our third date, Leonard picked me up in his car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than I made in 2 years. But instead of going to a restaurant, he drove. "I want to show you something," he said. We headed north on Lakeshore Drive. To our right, Lake Michigan stretched out dark and endless. To our left, the Chicago skyline glittered against the night sky. Leonard drove slowly, pointing out places as we passed. "That playground there," he said, gesturing to a small park near the beach. "I had my first fight there when I was 8 years old. Kid twice my size was picking on a smaller kid. I stepped in, got my nose broken, but I won." A few miles later, he slowed near a church. "My grandmother dragged me to Mass there every Sunday until I was 16. I hated it back then. Now I'd give anything to sit in those pews with her one more time. He showed me the corner where his best friend had died, the basketball court where he had spent every summer of his teenage years, the restaurant where his mother had worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. Each place was a piece of Leonard's story, each one he gave to me like a gift. This was intimacy beyond physical attraction. He was letting me see him, really see him. We ended up parked at a beach overlook, watching the waves roll in under the moonlight. The car was warm, the world outside quiet. "Why are you showing me all this?" I asked softly. Leonard turned to face me, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. "Because I want you to know me. The real me. Not the reputation or the rumors. Just me." I leaned into his touch. "I want that too." When he kissed me that night, it was different from the courtly gesture at the gallery. This kiss was deeper, more vulnerable. His lips were soft but insistent. His hand tangled in my hair. My fingers gripped his shirt, pulling him closer. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Leonard pressed his forehead to mine. "You're getting under my skin, Ursula Smith," he whispered. "Good," I whispered back. "You're under mine too." We were falling, both of us, and neither of us was trying to stop it. The weeks that followed blurred together in the most beautiful way. We saw each other almost every day, sometimes for hours, sometimes for stolen minutes between his meetings and my work. Every moment felt precious. Leonard introduced me to his world carefully, like someone showing a rare and delicate thing. He took me to restaurants where the owners greeted him with respect that bordered on reverence. Private clubs where conversations stopped when he entered a room. Places where power was the real currency, and Leonard clearly had plenty of it. I saw how people looked at him, how they stepped aside when he walked past, how his quiet words carried more weight than other people's shouts. It should have frightened me. Part of me knew it should have sent me running. But I also saw how gentle he was with me, how his hand would find the small of my back in crowded rooms, protective and possessive at once. How he listened when I talked, really listened, like my words mattered more than anything else happening around us. How he would text me good morning before I even woke up, and good night after I had already fallen asleep. I brought him into my world too. One Saturday afternoon, I took him to my restoration studio at the Art Institute. The space was quiet, filled with the smell of oils and solvents, natural light streaming through tall windows. I showed him the painting I was currently working on, a portrait from the 1800s, a woman's face barely visible under decades of grime and damaged varnish. "Watch," I said softly, dipping a small brush in solvent and carefully working on a tiny section of the canvas. Leonard stood behind me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. As I worked, the woman's eye began to emerge, bright and alive, staring out from the canvas like she had just been sleeping and was now waking up. "You brought her back," Leonard breathed, wonder in his voice. "She was always there," I replied. "Just hidden. Everything beautiful is still there underneath. It just takes patience to reveal it." I felt his hand on my shoulder, his fingers gentle. "Is that what you're doing to me?" he asked quietly. "Revealing what's underneath." I turned to face him, setting down my brush. "You don't need restoring, Leonard. You just need someone who sees you clearly." He kissed me there in my studio, surrounded by damaged art waiting for healing. The kiss tasted like hope. Our relationship developed its own rhythm. Leonard would pick me up from work, and we would walk along the lakefront path as the sun set over the city. His hand would engulf mine, our fingers intertwined. We didn't always talk. Sometimes silence was enough. Other evenings, I would go to his penthouse. He loved to cook for me, moving around his kitchen with surprising grace for such a large man. He made pasta from scratch, his tattooed hands working the dough with practiced skill. He told me these were his grandmother's recipes, each dish a memory. We would eat by candlelight, sharing food and stories, feeding each other bites from our forks. His eyes would hold mine across the table with an intensity that made my breath catch. After dinner, we would stand at those floor-to-ceiling windows, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the city lights reflect off Lake Michigan. Sometimes we would stay there until sunrise, talking about everything and nothing, watching the sky turn from black to purple to pink to gold. "I've lived here for 15 years, Leonard told me one morning as we watched the sun come up. "I've never once stopped to watch the sunrise. Not until you." I leaned back against his chest, his arms tightening around me. "You were too busy building your empire." "I was too busy being alone," he corrected quietly. The shift from attraction to something deeper happened so gradually that I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. One day I realized I didn't just want Leonard. I needed him. His good morning texts weren't just sweet anymore. They were necessary. His voice wasn't just attractive. It was home. His arms weren't just safe. They were the only place I wanted to be. I was falling in love with him. No, that's not right. I had already fallen. I was in love with him, completely and terrifyingly. But love was complicated when you loved a man like Leonard Creighton. I started noticing things. The way he would tense when his phone rang with certain calls. How he would leave the room to take conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. The security that followed us everywhere, discreet but always present. The careful way he navigated certain topics, telling me truths without telling me everything. I wasn't naive. I knew Leonard's empire wasn't built on legitimate business alone. I knew the power he wielded came with a price. I knew loving him meant accepting parts of his life I would never fully understand. Late at night, alone in my apartment, I would lie awake and think about walking away. About going back to my safe, predictable life. About choosing security over the beautiful danger of loving Leonard. But every time I saw him, those thoughts disappeared. Every time he touched me, kissed me, looked at me like I was the only thing in his world that truly mattered, I chose him all over again. Leonard had his own struggles. I could see it in his eyes sometimes, a war happening behind that intense gaze. He was torn between pulling me closer and pushing me away for my own good. One night in his penthouse, he held me tighter than usual. "You should run from me," he whispered into my hair. "You should run and never look back." "Do you want me to?" I asked, my heart hammering. "No," he admitted, his voice breaking. "God help me, no. I want to keep you. I want to be selfish and keep you even though I know I shouldn't." "Then keep me," I said simply. "I'm choosing this, Leonard. I'm choosing you." We were changing each other. I could feel it happening. Leonard was softer with me, more open. He laughed more. He slept better when I stayed over, like my presence quieted whatever demons usually kept him awake. I was braver because of him. Fiercer. I spoke up more at work. I took up more space in the world. Loving Leonard taught me that safety wasn't the same as living. We were falling without control. Both of us. Falling into something that felt inevitable and terrifying and absolutely right. Neither of us knew where it would lead. We just knew we couldn't stop. Didn't want to stop. Love had broken through both our defenses, and we were powerless against it. 3 months into our relationship, Leonard took me to the Garfield Park Conservatory on a Sunday afternoon. Spring had finally arrived in Chicago, but inside the conservatory, it felt like we had stepped into another world entirely. The building was massive, with glass walls that rose stories high. We walked through different rooms, each one a different climate. The fun room was cool and green, filled with prehistoric-looking plants. The desert room was hot and dry, cacti reaching toward the glass ceiling. But Leonard led me to the palm room, where towering palms created a canopy overhead and the air was warm and humid. We sat on a bench surrounded by tropical plants, the sounds of the city completely muffled by the thick glass and greenery. For a long moment, Leonard just held my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm like he always did when he was thinking. "My father died in the spring," he finally said, his voice quiet. "I was 12. It was sudden, a heart attack. He was only 38. I squeezed his hand, staying silent, letting him share at his own pace. He worked construction. 12, 14-hour days. He was trying to give us a better life, working himself to death to do it. Leonard's jaw tightened. After he died, I promised myself I would be strong enough to protect my family. Strong enough that would never be vulnerable again. "You were just a child," I said softly. I had to stop being a child that day. He looked at me, his dark eyes holding pain he rarely showed. "I built armor, Ursula. Physical, emotional, mental. I made myself into someone nobody could hurt. Someone who controlled everything around him so nothing could ever catch him off guard again." I shifted closer, my free hand coming up to cup his face. His stubble was rough against my palm. "And now?" I asked gently. "Now I'm tired of the armor." His voice broke slightly. "All I want is to be soft. With you, I want to be soft. I want to wake up in the morning and not immediately think about threats and strategy and control. I want to just be." My heart ached with love for this strong, complicated man. Real strength isn't about being hard, Leonard. Real strength is having the courage to feel, to be vulnerable, to let someone in even when it terrifies you. That takes more bravery than anything else. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. His face buried in my hair, his muscular body wrapped around mine like he was trying to merge us into one person. "You make me brave enough to try," he whispered. We sat there for a long time, just holding each other while the world outside continued without us. A week later, Leonard surprised me with tickets to the Adler Planetarium. The evening show was called Cosmic Wonder, a journey through the universe projected onto the domed ceiling. We lay back in the reclined seats, Leonard's arm around my shoulders, my head resting on his broad chest. As the lights dimmed and stars began to appear above us, I felt his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. The narrator's voice guided us through galaxies and nebulae, through the birth and death of stars, through the vast, incomprehensible beauty of space. But I was more aware of Leonard than anything on the ceiling. The way his fingers traced patterns on my shoulder, the way his breathing matched mine, the way he pulled me closer when the imagery showed the fragility of our small planet in the enormous universe. When the show ended and the lights came up slowly, neither of us moved. Other people filed out, but we stayed there, wrapped in each other. "You broke into my heart," Leonard murmured, his lips against my temple. "You didn't even try, and you just broke right through every defense I had. You stole every bit of it until there was nothing left that wasn't yours." I turned my head to look up at him. His eyes were intense, vulnerable, completely open. "And what do you think you did to me?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. I had my life all planned out. Safe. Predictable. I'd convinced myself that was enough. Then you walked into that gallery and turned everything upside down. You made me want things I'd given up on. Passion. Adventure. The kind of love that consumes you completely. Leonard's hand came up to cradle my face. "Are you scared?" "Terrified," I admitted. "And I've never felt more alive." He kissed me there in the empty planetarium, under the projected stars, and I felt the universe shrink down to just the two of us. Our connection went beyond anything physical. Yes, his touch set me on fire. Yes, I craved the feeling of his hands on my skin, his lips on mine. But what we shared went so much deeper. In his penthouse, we created our own world. Leonard loved to cook for me, and I loved to watch him work. He would tie an apron over his dress pants and rolled-up sleeves, his tattoos on full display as he moved around the kitchen. My grandmother taught me to cook, he told me one evening as he hand-rolled pasta dough. She said that feeding someone was an act of love, that you put your heart into the food and give it to people you care about. I sat on the counter, watching his strong hands work the dough with surprising gentleness. Is that what you're doing? Putting your heart into this? He looked up at me, his eyes soft. I've been giving you my heart since the night we met, Ursula. The food is just another way of showing it. We would eat by candlelight, the city sparkling beyond the windows. Leonard would feed me bites from his fork, watching my face as I tasted each dish. I would do the same for him, loving the way his eyes closed in appreciation. After dinner, we would sit on his couch, my body tucked against his side, and talk for hours. About everything. About nothing. About dreams and fears and hopes. If you could have any life, what would it look like? I asked him one night. Leonard was quiet for a moment, his fingers running through my hair. Something simple. A house, not a penthouse. Maybe near the water. A garden where I could grow tomatoes and herbs. You, waking up next to me every morning. Maybe kids someday, teaching them to cook, to be kind, to be strong without being hard. That sounds beautiful, I whispered. What about you? He asked. I used to think I wanted adventure. Travel, seeing the world, restoring art in famous museums across Europe. I tilted my head to look up at him. But now I just want you. However I can have you. Wherever that is. That's my dream. Leonard kissed the top of my head, pulling me impossibly closer. You have me. All of me. Every broken piece. You're not broken, I insisted. You're scarred. There's a difference. Scars mean you survived. They mean you're strong enough to heal. These quiet moments of vulnerability, of sharing our deepest selves, meant more than any grand gesture. This was intimacy in its truest form, being fully known and fully loved anyway. Every day, I fell deeper in love with Leonard Creighton. Not despite his complexity, but because of it. Not in spite of his past, but in appreciation of how it shaped him. Not overlooking his darkness, but seeing how hard he fought toward the light. And every day, I could see him falling deeper in love with me too. In the way he looked at me, in the gentleness of his touch, in the vulnerability he showed me that he showed no one else. We were building something real, something precious, something worth fighting for. We just didn't know yet how hard that fight would become. I brought Leonard to my workshop at the Art Institute on a quiet Saturday morning when the building was mostly empty. He had shown me his world, the restaurants where power players gathered, the streets that shaped him, the penthouse that represented everything he had built. Now I wanted to show him mine. My workshop was in the basement level, a space most visitors never saw. It was filled with natural light from high windows, the walls lined with paintings in various states of restoration. The air smelled of linseed oil and turpentine, scents I had grown to love over the years. Leonard looked around with genuine curiosity, his eyes taking in every detail. He moved carefully, like he was afraid his large frame might accidentally damage something precious. This is where the magic happens, I said, gesturing to my workstation. I was currently restoring a landscape from the late 1800s, a forest scene that had been so darkened by age and dirt that you could barely make out the trees. I had been working on it for 6 weeks, slowly revealing the layers underneath. "Watch," I said softly, pulling up a stool for him beside my work table. Leonard sat, his attention completely focused on me. I dipped a small cotton swab in solvent and carefully worked on a tiny section of the sky. Slowly, the brown haze gave way to the most beautiful pale blue. Then a hint of pink. Then soft white clouds that looked like they might actually move. "My God," Leonard breathed. "It was there the whole time." "Always," I confirmed, continuing to work. "The artist painted this beautiful sky. Time just buried it. Smoke, dirt, old varnish that yellowed, all of it covering up what was always underneath." I worked for another 20 minutes while Leonard watched in complete silence. Under my careful attention, more of the sky emerged. Birds appeared that had been invisible before. Light broke through clouds, creating depth and dimension. When I finally set down my tools and looked at him, there were tears in his eyes. "This is what you do to me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're restoring me. All the doubt and damage and darkness I've accumulated over the years, you're cleaning it away, revealing what's underneath. The man I could have been. The man I still might be." I turned on my stool to face him fully, taking his large hands in mine. "You are that man, Leonard. You always have been. You just couldn't see it." He pulled me into his arms, holding me like I was the most valuable thing in his world. Maybe I was. We started having picnics in Lincoln Park on Sunday afternoons. Leonard would pick up food from different places around the city, Italian sandwiches from a deli in Little Italy, fresh fruit from the farmer's market, pastries from a French bakery he loved. We would spread a blanket on the grass near the pond and watch the ducks glide across the water. Leonard always brought extra bread just so we could feed them. This powerful man, who commanded respect and fear in equal measure across Chicago, would sit cross-legged on the ground and laugh as ducks waddled over to snatch bread from his tattooed hands. "I want this," he said one afternoon, lying back on the blanket with his arm behind his head, watching clouds drift overhead. "Want what?" I asked, lying beside him. "This. Simplicity. Peace." He turned his head to look at me. "I want a house somewhere quiet. Not a penthouse trying to prove something. Just a home, with a yard where kids could play. A kitchen where I could cook Sunday dinners for my family." My heart skipped. Kids. Someday. Maybe. His hand found mine, our fingers interlacing. "I want to wake up next to someone I love and not immediately think about threats. I want to teach my children how to be strong without being hard, how to be kind in a world that isn't always kind back." He squeezed my hand. "I want to deserve a life like that. Leonard, I know what I am, Ursula. I know the things I've done, the choices I've made. And I know who you are," I insisted. "Not what you've done, but who you are at your core." One afternoon in late April, we walked through Lincoln Park when the cherry blossoms were in full bloom. Pink petals drifted through the air like snow, covering the ground in soft color. It was almost too beautiful to be real. Leonard stopped under one of the trees, pink blossoms falling around us. He turned to face me, his hands gentle on my shoulders. "I want to deserve you," he said quietly. "I want to be the kind of man who deserves your love, your trust, your future." I reached up, my hands framing his face, feeling the stubble on his jaw. "You already are that man. You've always been that man. You just needed someone to see it." "You see me," he whispered. "I see you," I confirmed. "All of you. And I love what I see." We were changing each other. I could feel it happening, see it in small ways every day. Leonard was gentler now. He smiled more easily. The hard edges that had defined him for so long were softening. He slept better when we were together, the nightmares that used to wake him fading. He talked about the future with hope instead of resignation. He made plans that extended beyond the next deal, the next threat, the next crisis. I was changing too, becoming fiercer, braver. I spoke up more at work, volunteering for projects I would have been too timid to pursue before. I took up more space in rooms. I stopped apologizing for existing. Loving Leonard taught me that I was strong enough to handle complexity, brave enough to face danger, fierce enough to fight for what mattered. At work, my colleagues noticed. "You're different," one of them said. "More confident." What changed? Everything, I wanted to say. Love changed everything. We created a bubble of happiness those spring months. A world where it was just the two of us, safe from the complications of our different lives. In that bubble, Leonard wasn't a man with a dangerous reputation. He was just mine. And I wasn't just a quiet restoration specialist. I was his. We existed in our own universe. Morning coffees at my kitchen table, his dress shirt from the night before rolled up on his muscular forearms. Late nights in his penthouse, cooking together, feeding each other, dancing in his living room to old jazz music with the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. Weekends exploring Chicago like tourists, the Art Institute, the Museum of Science and Industry, architectural boat tours on the Chicago River. Every moment felt stolen and precious. Every kiss felt like coming home. Every "I love you" felt like a promise we were both determined to keep. We knew the bubble couldn't last forever. Reality always intrudes eventually. But we held on to it as long as we could, building something strong enough to withstand whatever came next. We had no idea how soon that test would come. The bubble shattered on a warm June evening. I had stayed late at the Art Institute, finishing up documentation on a restoration project. The summer sun was just setting when I finally left, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I walked to the train station, took my usual route home to Lincoln Park, completely unaware that I was being followed. I noticed the car when I turned onto my street, a black SUV moving slowly, staying about half a block behind me. My heart started beating faster. I told myself I was being paranoid. This was Chicago. There were always cars on the street. But when I reached my apartment building, the SUV pulled to the curb. Two men got out. "Ursula Smith," one of them called. Every instinct screamed at me to run. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking. "We just want to talk," the man said, moving closer. "About Leonard Creighton." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice not as steady as I wanted. "Sure you do. You're his girl. That makes you useful." The man reached for my arm. I jerked back, my keys falling to the sidewalk. Fear flooded through me, real and cold. Then everything happened very fast. Another car appeared from nowhere, blocking the SUV. Three men emerged, moving with purpose and precision. I recognized one of them. He was part of Leonard's security, someone I'd seen at restaurants when we went out. "Step away from her," Leonard's security chief said. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. The two men hesitated. For a moment, I thought there might be violence right there on my quiet street. Then they backed off, hands raised, getting back in their SUV and driving away. The security chief turned to me. "Ms. Smith, I need you to come with me. You're not safe here right now." "What's happening?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Leonard will explain everything. But right now, we need to move." They drove me across the city to a building in the West Loop. The safe house was a penthouse apartment, smaller than Leonard's place but still luxurious. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, the city lights beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. Mr. Creighton is on his way, the security chief told me. You're safe here. Nobody knows about this location except our most trusted people. I sat on the couch, my whole body shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. I had known, intellectually, that Leonard's world was dangerous. But knowing it and experiencing it were completely different things. 20 minutes later, I heard the door open. Leonard walked in, and for a moment, I didn't recognize him. This was the man people feared. The crime lord who controlled Chicago's underground. His face was a mask of cold fury, his eyes hard, his jaw set. Every line of his body radiated controlled violence. The gentleness I knew was completely gone, buried under layers of ice. His security chief spoke to him in low tones, explaining what had happened. Leonard's hands clenched into fists at his sides, the muscles in his arms tensing, his tattoos seeming to move with the tension. Then he saw me, really saw me. The mask shattered. "Ursula," he breathed, crossing the room in 3 long strides. I stood, and he pulled me into his arms so tightly I could barely breathe. His whole body was shaking, his face buried in my hair, his hands running over my back, my arms, like he needed to confirm I was really there, really okay. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice ragged. "Did they touch you? Did they hurt you?" "I'm okay. I managed. Your security got there in time. I'm okay." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his hands framing my face, his thumbs brushing my cheeks. His eyes were devastated, filled with guilt and fear and love all mixed together. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "God, Ursula, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. My life, my choices, they put you in danger. You could have been hurt because of me. But I wasn't." "This time," he interrupted. "You weren't hurt this time. But what about next time? What about the time my security doesn't get there fast enough?" He released me, stepping back, running his hands through his hair. The gesture was so unlike his usual controlled demeanor that it broke my heart. We were alone now. His security had left us, giving us privacy. The safe house was quiet except for the faint sounds of the city below. Leonard walked to the windows, staring out at the Chicago skyline. The city he controlled. The city that now threatened the woman he loved. "I knew this was a mistake," he said quietly, his back to me. "I knew I should have stayed away from you. But I was selfish. I wanted you so badly that I ignored every warning sign, every rational thought telling me this could never work. Leonard, you deserve better than this," he continued, his voice breaking. "You deserve a normal man with a normal life. Someone who can take you out to dinner without security. Someone whose enemies won't use you as leverage. Someone who won't get you killed." I walked up behind him, placing my hand on his broad back. I could feel the tension in every muscle, the way he was holding himself together by sheer force of will. "Look at me," I said softly. He turned slowly. In the reflection of the city lights, I could see tears on his face. Leonard Creighton, the most powerful and dangerous man I knew, was crying. "I can't lose you," he whispered. "But I can't keep you either. Not like this. Not when loving me puts you in danger." We stood there in that safe house, high above the city, at the precipice of a decision that would change everything. The happiness we had built felt fragile suddenly, threatened by the reality we had been ignoring. This was the moment that could end us. The moment where love would either be enough or it wouldn't. I looked at the man I loved, seeing both his strength and his vulnerability, and I made my choice. Leonard wiped his eyes quickly, like he was ashamed of the tears. He straightened his shoulders, and I watched him put the armor back on piece by piece. When he spoke again, his voice was steady, Controlled, devastatingly final. I have to let you go, he said. I love you too much to keep putting you in danger. Tonight was a warning. Next time, I might not be able to protect you. Next time, you could be hurt or worse because of me. I can't live with that. Something fierce rose up inside me. Something I didn't even know I had until that moment. Don't you dare, I said, my voice sharp enough to make him look at me in surprise. Don't you dare make that choice for me. Ursula. No. I walked toward him, my fear from earlier transforming into anger. Not at the men who had threatened me, but at Leonard for trying to decide my future without me. You don't get to choose what's best for me. You don't get to decide what risks I'm willing to take. You don't understand what you're saying, Leonard argued, his hands clenched at his sides. These people, they don't play games. They don't have limits. If they think hurting you will get to me, they'll do it without hesitation. I understand perfectly. I stood in front of him, tilting my head back to meet his eyes. I understand that your world is dangerous. I understand that loving you comes with risks. I'm not naive, Leonard. I know exactly what I'm choosing. You're choosing potential violence, potential kidnapping, potential death. His voice rose, desperation bleeding through. How can you choose that? Because the alternative is worse. My voice matched his now, all the emotion of the evening pouring out. The alternative is going back to my safe, colorless life without you. Going through the motions. Existing but not living. I'm more afraid of that than I am of any danger your world might bring. Leonard shook his head, his jaw tight. You say that now. But when the danger becomes real, when the threat is immediate. It was real tonight, I interrupted. The threat was immediate tonight. And yes, I was terrified. My hands are still shaking. I held them up to show him. But the only thing I could think, the only thing that mattered, was getting back to you. Not running away. Not ending this. Getting back to you. You could have been killed. I could be killed crossing the street. I could be killed in a car accident. I could be killed by a million random things that have nothing to do with you. I reached for his hands, pulling them into mine. Love is always a risk, Leonard. Every single time we open our hearts to someone, we risk pain. We risk loss. We risk devastation. That's what makes it brave. That's what makes it worth it. He looked down at our joined hands, his tattooed fingers intertwined with mine. I don't want to be the reason you get hurt. You're not the reason. Whoever sent those men tonight, they're the reason. And you know what? Your security stopped them. You protected me. You'll keep protecting me. I squeezed his hands tighter. But more than that, I can protect myself. I'm not helpless. I'm not fragile. I'm strong enough to handle this. Strong enough to stand beside you, not behind you. Ursula. I love you, Leonard Creighton, I said, my voice breaking with the intensity of it. I love you with every fiber of my being. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love your past and your present and whatever future we can build together. I'm not going anywhere. You can't make me go. The only way this ends is if you stop loving me, and even then, I'd probably still fight for you. Leonard pulled his hands from mine, and for a horrible moment, I thought I'd lost. Then his hands came up to cup my face, his touch achingly gentle despite the emotion raging in his eyes. Stop loving you, he said, his voice raw. I couldn't stop if I tried. I lost control the moment I met you. Every rule I had, every wall I'd built, you walked right through all of it like they were made of paper. I fell into your arms and I can't get back up. I don't want to get back up. Then don't, I whispered, my hands coming up to cover his. Stay fallen. Stay with me. We'll figure the rest out together. Together, he repeated, like he was testing the word. Together, I confirmed. Not you protecting me like I'm something fragile. Not me following blindly. Together. As equals. As partners. Leonard's eyes searched mine, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign that I didn't mean what I was saying. He wouldn't find it. I had never been more certain of anything in my life. You're sure? He asked one last time. I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed me then. Not gentle. Not careful. Desperate and reverent at the same time, like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. His hands tangled in my hair. Mine gripped the front of his shirt, pulling him closer, closer, never close enough. The kiss tasted like tears and promises and commitment. It tasted like a future we were choosing despite the obstacles. It tasted like love, real, complicated, dangerous, beautiful love. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Leonard pressed his forehead to mine. We'll figure it out, he said, his voice steady now, certain. I'll make changes. I'll get out of the worst of it. I'll build something legitimate, something safe. For you. For us. For the future we're going to have. We'll figure it out together, I corrected. Together, he agreed. This was the moment everything changed. Not just our relationship, but us as individuals. Leonard stopped trying to control everything alone. I stopped waiting for life to happen to me. We became partners, equals, a team. The danger didn't disappear that night. The complications didn't magically resolve. But we faced them together, and that made all the difference. The incident that night became the turning point for everything. Leonard didn't make his decision lightly. For weeks after, he was quieter than usual, more introspective. I would catch him staring out windows, lost in thought. He was calculating, planning, figuring out how to extract himself from a world he'd been part of for 15 years. It's not simple, he told me one night as we sat in his penthouse. I can't just walk away. There are obligations, connections, people who depend on the current structure. If I do this wrong, it could start a war. Then we do it right, I said, taking his hand. Slowly, carefully, together. He looked at me with such love it took my breath away. Together. The process was slow and often dangerous. Leonard started legitimizing his operations piece by piece. He invested in legal businesses, restaurants throughout Chicago, real estate developments, a security company that provided protection for legitimate clients. He carefully transferred power, made strategic alliances, and slowly, methodically, extracted himself from the darkest parts of his empire. It took months. There were setbacks. There were nights when he came home tense and exhausted, the weight of it all pressing down on him. But I was there for every moment, reminding him why he was doing this, what we were building toward. One weekend in late July, we drove out to Starved Rock State Park, about 90 minutes southwest of Chicago. We needed to get away from the city, from the pressure, from everything. We needed to just be Leonard and Ursula again, not two people navigating complicated transformations. The park was beautiful, 18 canyons carved by glacial meltwater, waterfalls cascading over moss-covered rocks, hiking trails winding through forests. We spent the day exploring, holding hands as we climbed trails, laughing when we got lost, stopping to kiss beside waterfalls. By late afternoon, we reached a cliff edge overlooking the Illinois River. The view was stunning, the river winding through the valley below, trees stretching to the horizon, the sky beginning to turn gold with the approaching sunset. Leonard stood at the edge, his hand warm in mine, and he was quiet for a long time. "I'm going to build something new," he finally said, his voice carried away by the wind. "Something legitimate. Something I can be proud of. Something worthy of you." I squeezed his hand, turning to look at him. "Create a life worthy of yourself, Leonard. Not me. You deserve this transformation for you, not just for us." He pulled me into his arms, kissing the top of my head. "For both of us, then. For the life we're going to build together." Summer turned to autumn. Chicago transformed from green to gold to crimson. We found our rhythm in the midst of change. Leonard's legitimate businesses began to flourish. The restaurants became popular destinations. Good food, excellent service, the kind of places where families celebrated birthdays and couples had anniversaries. His real estate investments transformed neglected buildings into beautiful spaces. The security company built a reputation for professionalism and integrity. For the first time in his adult life, Leonard was building something that didn't require fear or intimidation. And he discovered something surprising. This brought him more satisfaction than power ever had. Creating jobs for people. Providing quality services. Building something that would last not because people were afraid, but because it was genuinely good. "I never knew it could feel like this," he told me one evening as we reviewed plans for a new restaurant. "Building something real. Something that helps people instead of exploiting them. I actually sleep better at night." I continued my restoration work at the Art Institute, but I watched Leonard's transformation with the same care I gave to damaged paintings. He was revealing himself layer by layer, the good man who had always been underneath the hard exterior. The man who wanted to create, not destroy. The man who wanted to be loved, not feared. We became each other's greatest project and biggest support. When I had a difficult restoration that frustrated me, Leonard would bring dinner to my workshop and sit with me while I worked, asking questions, offering encouragement, reminding me that patience always won in the end. When Leonard had setbacks in his transformation, deals that fell through, people who betrayed his trust, moments when the old world tried to pull him back, I was there to remind him why he was doing this, to hold him when doubt crept in, to believe in him when he struggled to believe in himself. "You're my anchor," he told me one night. "When everything feels unstable, you keep me grounded." "And you're my wings," I replied. "You taught me I could fly." We were building more than just legitimate businesses or restored art. We were building a life together, a partnership based on mutual respect, trust, and love so deep it transformed everything it touched. Leonard's body still carried his tattoos, the roses and thorns, the compass, the phoenix, but they meant something different now. Not symbols of a hard life, but reminders of how far he'd come. The roses represented beauty surviving despite harsh conditions, and he had survived. The compass pointed to new directions now, toward legitimacy, toward love, toward a future he was choosing instead of one being forced upon him. By October, the transformation was well underway. Leonard wasn't completely free of his past. That would take more time, but he had taken massive steps toward a different future. Our future. And he was ready to make that future official. Leonard had been acting strange all day. Not bad strange, just different. More nervous than I'd ever seen him. This man who faced down dangerous rivals without blinking was fidgeting with his phone, checking the time every few minutes, seeming distracted. "Are you okay?" I asked over lunch. "Perfect," he said, but his smile was tight. "I have something planned for tonight. Dress nice." That evening, he picked me up wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit that made his eyes look even darker. I wore a burgundy dress that he'd once told me he loved. The October air was crisp, That perfect autumn temperature where you needed a light jacket but didn't feel cold. Where are we going? I asked as we drove downtown. You'll see, was all he said, his hand finding mine across the center console. He pulled up to the Willis Tower. I looked at him in confusion. We're going to the sky deck, he explained, helping me out of the car. We've been to the sky deck before, I said, smiling. Not like this. He'd arranged for a private visit. The observation deck, normally crowded with tourists, was empty except for us and one attendant who quickly made himself scarce. We rode the elevator up 103 stories in silence, Leonard's hand never leaving mine, his thumb tracing those familiar cycles on my palm. When the doors opened, Chicago spread out before us in every direction. The city was lit up against the darkening sky, millions of lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Lake Michigan stretched out to the east, dark and vast. The Chicago River snaked through downtown, its bridges lit up like jewelry. Leonard led me to the glass floor, the section where you could look straight down through reinforced glass to the street 103 stories below. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Do you remember the planetarium? Leonard asked, both of us standing on the glass, the city beneath our feet. Of course, I said. You told me I broke into your heart. You did. He turned to face me fully, taking both my hands in his. You absolutely did. My heart started racing. There was something in his eyes, something intense and vulnerable and nervous all at once. Ursula, I spent 15 years building walls, protecting myself, making sure nobody could get close enough to hurt me. His voice was steady, but I could feel his hands trembling slightly in mine. Then you walked into that gallery, and every single wall crumbled. You didn't even try, and you just walked right through every defense like they were made of air. Leonard, let me finish, he said softly, smiling. Please. I nodded, tears already forming in my eyes. You broke into my heart with a kiss. You stole every bit of it until I lost complete control and fell into your arms. And I never want to find my way back. He released my hands and slowly, deliberately, got down on one knee. Right there on the glass floor, 103 stories above Chicago, with the entire city sprawling beneath us. He pulled out a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, opening it to reveal a ring, a simple, elegant diamond that caught the city lights and threw them back in brilliant sparks. Marry me, Ursula. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you what your love has made possible. Let me wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. Let me build a life with you, a real life, the kind we both deserve. Marry me. I couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down my face, happy tears, overwhelming tears. I pulled him to his feet, or tried to, because he was so much bigger than me, and he rose, still holding the ring, waiting for my answer. Yes, I finally managed, my voice choked with emotion. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto my finger with shaking hands, and then I was in his arms and his mouth was on mine and we were kissing like the world was ending and beginning at the same time. I tasted salt from my tears, felt the solid strength of his body against mine, heard his heart hammering in his chest matching my own racing heartbeat. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Leonard pressed his forehead to mine. You just made me the happiest man alive, he whispered. Good, I whispered back. Because you've made me the happiest woman. We spent another hour on the sky deck, just holding each other, looking out at the city that had brought us together, planning our future in excited whispers. Planning the wedding was easy because we both knew exactly what we wanted. Not a big society event. Not hundreds of people we barely knew. something intimate and meaningful. We chose the Chicago Botanic Garden in Glencoe, about 30 minutes north of the city. The garden was over 300 acres of cultivated beauty, roses, orchids, native plants, Japanese gardens, English walled gardens. We had spent peaceful afternoons there during our relationship, walking hand in hand through the various sections, talking and dreaming. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. A botanical garden, where broken things were carefully tended until they bloomed again. Where patience and care could create something beautiful. Where growth was nurtured and celebrated. "It's perfect," I said when we met with the coordinator. "It's us," Leonard agreed, squeezing my hand. We spent October and November preparing for our December wedding. Quiet afternoons choosing flowers, tasting cakes, writing vows. Every decision we made together, both of us equal partners in creating the day that would start our forever. Leonard was still transforming his business life, but now he had something concrete to work toward. A wedding date, a wife, a future that was real and touchable and close enough to see. "I'm going to deserve this," he told me one afternoon as we addressed invitations. "I'm going to deserve you." "You already do," I replied, as I always did. "But I love watching you become who you've always been meant to be." Our wedding day was approaching, and with it, the beginning of everything we'd fought for, chosen, and built together. In the weeks leading up to our wedding, Leonard and I spent a lot of time reflecting on how far we'd come, how much we'd changed, how much we'd learned from loving each other. One evening, sitting in his penthouse with the December snow falling softly outside, Leonard traced the rose and thorn tattoo on his arm absently. "I used to think strength meant being impenetrable," he said quietly. "Building walls so high that nothing could hurt me. Being so hard that nothing could crack me. But that's not strength at all, is it?" "No," I agreed, curled up against his side. "It's not. Real strength is this," he continued, his arm tightening around me. "Being vulnerable with someone you trust. Opening yourself up completely, knowing you could be hurt, and doing it anyway. That terrified me more than any physical threat ever did." Leonard had learned that true strength wasn't about dominance or control. It was about having the courage to be soft with the right person, to show weakness, to admit fear, to ask for help, to cry when he needed to cry and laugh without restraint and love without holding back. He had spent years building power based on fear. People respected him because they were afraid of what would happen if they didn't. But now, running legitimate businesses, he was discovering a different kind of power, power based on love and respect. Employees who worked hard because they appreciated him, not because they feared him. Partners who trusted him because he'd earned it, not because he'd forced it. "It's better this way," he told me one night after a successful business dinner. "Building something people actually want to be part of. Creating instead of controlling. I sleep better. I smile more. I'm actually happy." His tattoos had shifted in meaning too. The roses and thorns weren't just about his mother surviving harsh conditions anymore. They were about his own journey, beauty emerging from pain, growth possible even in difficult circumstances. The compass on his chest no longer pointed to territory he controlled, but to the direction he was choosing, toward light, toward legitimacy, toward love. The phoenix on his shoulder blade meant something profound now. Death and rebirth, rising from the ashes of who he'd been to become who he was meant to be. He hadn't erased his past. He transformed it into something meaningful. "Redemption is possible," he said one night, his voice filled with wonder. "I used to think once you made certain choices, you were locked into that path forever. But people can change. They really can. When they find something worth changing for." Opening his heart hadn't made him weak. It had made him whole. For the first time in his adult life, Leonard felt complete. Not because he had power or money or respect, but because he had love. Real, genuine, transformative love. I had my own lessons to learn. I had spent 28 years choosing safety over everything else. Safe career, safe apartment, safe relationships. I thought safety was the goal, the ultimate achievement. But loving Leonard taught me that safety isn't the same as living. Real life requires risk. Real love demands courage. The willingness to be vulnerable, to be hurt, to lose control. That's what makes us fully alive. When those men confronted me outside my apartment, I discovered a fierce strength I never knew I possessed. I didn't crumble. I didn't fall apart. I stood firm in my choice, in my love, in my commitment to Leonard. That night revealed something important. I was stronger than I thought, braver than I believed, capable of handling far more than I'd given myself credit for. My entire career was built on restoration, taking broken things and making them whole again. But I had only applied that philosophy to art, never to people or relationships. Leonard taught me that restoration isn't just about paintings. It's about seeing the potential in people, even when they can't see it themselves. It's about patient, consistent effort to reveal the beauty underneath the damage. I learned to trust my instincts. When everyone else might have told me to run from Leonard, my heart knew better. When logic said our relationship was too complicated, too dangerous, my soul knew it was right. Fighting for what matters requires trusting yourself even when the world questions you. Together, we learned lessons that neither of us could have learned alone. Love isn't about two perfect people finding each other. It's about two imperfect people choosing each other every single day. We had plenty of imperfections, baggage from our pasts, fears about our future, moments of doubt and struggle. But we chose each other anyway. Every morning, every night, every difficult moment, we chose us. Love requires both holding on and letting go. Holding on to each other, to our commitment, to the promises we made. But letting go of fear, of control, of the need to protect ourselves at all costs. It's a delicate balance, one we were still learning. We discovered that intimacy goes so much deeper than physical attraction. Yes, we wanted each other. The chemistry between us was undeniable. But the real intimacy came from emotional connection, intellectual partnership, spiritual alignment, knowing someone's deepest fears and loving them anyway, being trusted with someone's vulnerabilities and treating them with care. Most importantly, we learned that love has genuine power to redeem, transform, and heal. Not by erasing the past or pretending damage never happened, but by creating a future that makes the journey worthwhile. Love didn't fix everything. It didn't solve every problem or erase every scar. But it gave us the strength to face everything together. Leonard became a better man because love gave him a reason to try. I became a braver woman because love showed me I was capable of more than I knew. Together, we became something greater than either of us could have been alone. As our wedding day approached, we carried these lessons with us like precious gifts, understanding that the commitment we were making wasn't about a perfect future, but about facing an imperfect future together. About choosing love every day, even on the days when it's difficult. About building something real and lasting and beautiful. These lessons would carry us through everything that came next. The challenges and joys of marriage. The life we would build together. The family we hope to create someday. Every moment of our forever. Our wedding day arrived on a perfect December afternoon. The Chicago Botanic Garden was transformed by early winter, not the harsh cold of February when we'd met, but the gentle beginning of the season. The trees were painted in the last shades of amber and crimson, leaves still clinging to branches. The garden paths were lined with small lights that would glow as evening fell. We kept it intimate, just the people who truly mattered. Leonard's business associates weren't invited, only the few friends who had stood by him through his transformation. My colleagues from the Art Institute, the barista from my corner cafe who had become a real friend. People who knew us, really knew us, and celebrated what we'd found together. The ceremony took place in the English-walled garden, surrounded by late-blooming roses and evergreen hedges. A small wooden arbor decorated with white flowers and trailing greenery stood where we would exchange our vows. When I walked down the makeshift aisle, Leonard's face did something I'd never seen before. His usual control completely vanished. Tears streamed down his face openly, and he didn't bother wiping them away. He just stood there, this powerful, muscular, tattooed man, crying because he was happy. When I reached him and took his hands, he whispered, "You're so beautiful." "So are you," I whispered back. The officiant gave a brief introduction, but the moment everyone waited for was the vows. We'd written our own. Leonard went first. His voice was strong and clear, though thick with emotion. "Ursula, I promise to love you fiercely and gently, with everything I am. I promise to protect your heart as carefully as I guard my own. I promise to build a life with you that honors the best parts of both of us, your kindness and my strength, your patience and my determination, your hope and my loyalty. I promise to choose you every single day, in the good times and the difficult ones. You restored me, and I will spend my life being worthy of that gift." I could barely see him through my tears, but I didn't look away as I spoke my vows. "Leonard, I choose you. I choose this love, this life, this adventure. I choose the risk and the reward, the challenge and the joy. You showed me that life is meant to be lived fully, not safely. That love is worth fighting for. I promise to see you, all of you, and to love every part. I promise to be your home, your safe place, your partner in everything. I promise to stand beside you, never behind you, as we build our forever together." When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Leonard pulled me into his arms and kissed me like he was claiming me, cherishing me, promising me everything all at once. The kiss was tender and passionate, sweet and intense. Our first kiss as husband and wife, the beginning of forever. Our small gathering erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at a beautifully restored mansion overlooking Lake Michigan, just north of the city. The building had been saved from demolition and carefully brought back to its original glory, another restoration, another beautiful thing given new life. It felt appropriate for our celebration. The reception room was warm and intimate, decorated simply with candles and winter flowers. But what I remember most was the music. Leonard had hired a jazz quartet, saxophone, trumpet, piano, and upright bass. They played the old standards his grandmother had loved, the music that had been playing the night we went to the Green Mill. Leonard pulled me onto the dance floor for our first dance as husband and wife. His strong arms wrapped around me, my head resting on his chest, listening to his heartbeat beneath the fabric of his suit. The heart that belonged to me now, completely. "Happy," he murmured against my hair. "Beyond measure," I replied, the same words I'd said when he proposed. As evening deepened, we stepped out onto the mansion's terrace. Lake Michigan stretched out before us, dark and vast, the waves rolling in to kiss the shore in endless rhythm. The December air was cold, but Leonard's arms around me kept me warm. "I love you," he said softly. "Every moment, every heartbeat, every breath, it's all yours." "And mine is yours," I replied, turning in his arms to face him. "This is just the beginning of everything, you know." He kissed me then, slow and deep and full of promise. A kiss that tasted like forever. Our love story wasn't simple or safe or conventional, but it was authentic, transformative, and absolutely real. We found real love, messy and complicated and beautiful and brave. The kind that doesn't make sense on paper but makes perfect sense in your heart. Leonard broke into my heart with a kiss. He stole every bit of it until I lost complete control and fell into his arms. And I was grateful for every moment of that beautiful theft. Because real love makes you lose control and find yourself at the same time. It catches you when you fall and then encourages you to fly. It transforms you into the person you were always meant to be. That's the kind of love we found. The kind worth every risk. The kind that makes everything else worth it. And as we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the waves and the stars, we knew this was just the beginning. The beginning of everything we'd fought for, chosen, and built together. Our forever had finally begun. Thank you so much for watching our story. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more powerful love stories like this one. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to believe in love again. Tomorrow we're dropping another incredible story you won't want to miss. Thank you for being part of our community and for letting us share these stories of hope, transformation, and the power of real love. We're so grateful for each and every one of you.